I remember my dad bought a camera, and he was trying to make a living out of photography. And he would always take these artsy photos. We'd go up to the mountains, and he had a macro lens, and he would take pictures of like the bees on the flowers and stuff like that. And I remember thinking it was so cool, and he bought me this little point and shoot camera. And I remember one time we went up to Provo Canyon, and we just stopped at one of the parks on the way up, and they have a little walkway. And on like in the walkway, there's this place where the roots of this tree nearby are like trying to grow up through the walkway. And I thought the cracks were cool, and so I was like taking close-up photos with my my little point and shoot of like the cracks in the ground. And I just remember like looking back at those photos and seeing like the bokeh and stuff like that, which back then I had no idea why I liked it, but looking back on it now, I can see like where I found my fascination with that. And that's kind of like where it started. And from there, I knew I wanted to be a storyteller in some way, shape, or form. And so I've spent a lot of time writing. I've spent a lot of time reading and watching movies. I studied film for a long time, and then I kind of just transitioned back to photography because it's probably the most reliably doable medium, if that makes sense, of all the storytelling. And I feel like it's the pinnacle of, or almost the pinnacle of storytelling. But yeah, so I just knew I wanted to be a storyteller, and photography is the most malleable avenue that I could do that with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think like what you're trying to say is like photography, when compared to video, at least, it's a lot easier to stay with it and to just casually do it and bring a camera with you everywhere. Whereas video, there's a lot more planning and stuff that takes place.
Definitely.
But I think maybe one of the interesting things is almost in the reverse. It's a lot easier maybe to have a story be told in a great way through video because you have a lot more to work with. Like you have motion and emotion, all that stuff in there. Whereas a photo is a single moment. And so you almost have to do a little more planning in that sense to tell a good story through photos or a series of
That's
photos.
super true.
Which is really interesting. I know you had recently done a series that you posted through Instagram called it was 7 Morning Challenge, right?
Yeah, 7 Morning Challenge.
Tell me about that and like where you got the inspiration from that and what your purpose was behind that series.
Definitely, yeah. So there's a photographer on YouTube. I don't remember his name, but he's Austrian. And he is a film photographer, and he'll go out and do these challenges every once in a while for himself, where he just tries to get up, 7 mornings in a row and just go out and take some photos. And so I remember watching that video and feeling super inspired and just kind of remembering or thinking to myself about how I want to take more photos, but it's just hard to find time to, because I work a 9 to 5, and normally the sun is like setting by the time I get out of work, and I got to eat dinner and stuff like that. And so the only time I really had to get out and take photos at that time was before work started, when the sun was like just coming up, and I had like an hour or two. So I'd get up super early, and I'd go out before the sun rose and try and find a location. I didn't even know where I was going. I just like pick a spot on Google Maps and just go. And so I took a couple photos in the mountains. I took a couple photos in some random dude's field. I was probably trespassing, but it's fine. And yeah, I just go out and like just look, just try and find something and explore. And I challenged myself to do that 7 mornings in a row, and it was actually super insightful. Just being able to see that I could make something that I liked consistently on a daily basis if I actually like dedicated myself to that and cut out the time to go do it. So yeah, it was actually like a really eye-opening experience for me. And I think too, a lot of my expectations for photography, especially originally, I wanted to get out and take like vistas, landscapes, like the big grandiose.
Right. We all do.
Yeah. I mean, it's every photographer's dream, but, I found myself almost feeling depressed that I couldn't get out and do that every day. And so it was eye-opening to get out and just go take photos every day and actually feel pretty happy about the photos that I got, even though some of the photos were like pictures of the soap by like the kitchen sink,
Hey, soap can look cool.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I think like what you're saying there is definitely a lesson or like something that a lot of people need to hear, because a lot of people probably get sucked into this mindset of, oh, I have to go out to some epic location with a huge, amazing view to get a good photo or to get better. But that is absolutely not the case. A lot of times when you're spending time like you did on, 7 mornings in a row, going to a random place that you just thought about going to that morning, with no plan, like that, I think is where you probably develop your eye for photography a lot faster than if you just go to Zion and see all the beautiful landscape that's there. Because in those situations, you can just point your camera anywhere and get a good photo.
100%.
But like for what you're doing, you're going to like your local park, you're going to a field, you're shooting a photo of your kitchen sink with soap by it. Like if you're going to make a good photo out of that and be happy with something, you have to really push yourself and train yourself to see the world in a new way.
It definitely comes down to, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
It definitely comes down to just kind of like taking time to find the essentials to photography and just like your average day-to-day life. So like with just the soap by the sink, for example, just like finding a creative way to compose that shot and find the ways to, light that shot and just like find the best way to, I don't know, compose the image, if that makes sense. And I think, kind of like you were saying, if you're just in the grandest landscape, then you really can point your camera anywhere and it's going to be an awesome photo. But what would make those photos better is if you are training yourself to recognize compositions in everyday life. And by doing that, you can make those awesome photos even better.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to show that when you do stuff like that, you can put photos together or like a series together that actually looks really good, even though like the subjects aren't all that interesting. Because I remember there's a photo in that series of like your hallway looking into your kitchen with your kitchen table. And, I described that, on the podcast here. No one is going to think, oh, that's going to look like an amazing photo. It's like, why would I need to look at that photo? Yeah. But it was actually a really good photo. Like the composition, the edit on it was great. Like you pull it together. And I think that really goes to show like when you can do that, you actually are on a different level than a lot of other photographers because you can take the mundane and make it look really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what I was going for with that 7 morning challenge, is just trying to find the mundane everyday things in life and just figure out how to make that into something special for myself. And because, I don't know, I remember waking up on that morning when I took that shot from my bedroom into the kitchen and it felt special to me, even though it's not special to anyone else probably. And even though it is like compositionally and technically a good photo, it's not a photo anyone's going to hang up in their living room, but it's something that I'm proud of. And now that it's a memory that I look back on and I feel that mood that I felt when I took that photo. And it's just like that early morning vibe. When you just got up before you eat breakfast, before you go out and do anything, and you've just got like that little bit of peace and quiet in the morning. And I was just excited to like capture that feeling. And that was kind of like the story that I was going for, kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, just wanting to be a storyteller. And I think capturing that emotion is something that I strive to do in my photos.
Yeah, it's definitely important, and I think you also touched on another idea that a lot of people overlook, and that is to get into this whole space and to take photos, at least occasionally, for yourself and for your own enjoyment, and not just go find the coolest landscape that you can to show off to everyone. Like, take the time to actually find a shot that you're proud of, even if it's not the greatest shot that you've ever had, but one that you will look back on one day like you do with that series. And it's like, this was just like a little, quick thing you did in the morning, but here you are, like, I love looking at that photo. And like that speaks to really, I think, the art behind what we do and what it means to you personally as an individual. And that's really cool. Now, in this whole series, where were you finding inspiration on a day-to-day basis? Not just for the whole series, but like, how did you figure out like what you wanted to do, where you wanted to go, and like what you were really trying to do that day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a tricky question too. I think a lot of it just came down to kind of sifting through old memories, because everywhere that I went and took photos, almost everywhere, was a place that I had been before, and I had memories that were attached to that place. So, like, for example, one of the mornings I went out to this park. It's just a Provo Canyon, and it's not like a super crazy park or anything, but I remember one time when I was a kid, I was there with some of my friends, and the forest next to the park is like pretty dense and pretty big. And I remember running out there with them, and we had like toy swords, and we were just playing like Lord of the Rings in the woods. It was so cool. It was like one of my favorite memories from my childhood. And I remember waking up that morning and just trying to think of a location. And I was like siphoning is not the right word, sifting through my memories, just trying to find something that stood out to me as like an interesting location. And so I remembered that memory of me just playing Lord of the Rings with my friends in the woods. I was like, that place is cool. I'm going to go there and take some photos. And so, yeah, I mean, I just drove out there. It's like a 30-minute drive from my house. So I didn't have too much time that morning to like snap any really good photos that I was super proud of. Although I actually am pretty proud of the photos that I got there that day. But it is just kind of the same thing where it's like both of those photos were just me walking through those woods and kind of just like remembering that. And you can totally see in the photos that it's like I edited them specifically to look Lord of the Ringsy, if that makes sense. Even though I'm just like wearing a jeans and a t-shirt walking through these woods, you know? And so it's just kind of something where I reached into my memory and just found those special moments for myself. And I went back to those places, and that's how I found my inspiration to shoot in those different locations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool parts about like maybe it's the power of photography, because same thing like with the cracks in the ground with your point and shoot camera. You took that photo a long time ago, and like it's cool looking back on that moment. But like here you are, you played Lord of the Rings in the woods as a kid. Now you went back to that place, and that was like your inspiration for a shot to take now. And 20 years from now, you'll be able to look back on that photo of you finding inspiration from when you were even a kid. And like in a way, it's really cool because like it links your whole life together in a way, and you can relive all of these moments through a single image, which is a really cool thing about photography.
That is really cool. Yeah, I actually really like that idea. It's kind of a game that I play with myself where sometimes I'll remember, or I'll be in a moment and I'll be like just thinking about next year. I'll be like, next year at some point I'm going to remember this moment. And then eventually it makes like a chain of just moments where you look back on last year's moment and you remember that, and you remember remembering last year's moment. It's kind of just like this funny game. I know a couple people that do that with themselves actually, but it's kind of an interesting thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really neat thing that we get to do as we're capturing time in this way. We can look through our Lightroom folders and we see all the photos we've taken in the past. Like this whole year, I mean, it's been one of the coolest years of my life getting to see all these new places. And I look through all that, I'm like, wow, this all happened. Like that was real. I got to see all these places. And, you see a quick photo, like the cover image of the folder, and suddenly all these memories start coming back in your mind. And like you relive all of that. And it's not just, the one moment where you took that photo. It's all the other in-between moments that came up along the way. And I think that's one of the coolest things. But what we do is one photo does not capture a single moment of time, even though that's what's in the frame. There's so much more that's hidden behind that frame that you don't ever get to see.
Yeah, I think there's totally a lot of memories that can be captured in any one photograph. And I think too, there's actually a picture I took a while ago. It's on my list of bucket shots. And I was super excited to take it, but I wanted to drive around to the other side of Utah Lake. So I live in Orem, which is like right up against Utah Lake. And I drove around to the other side of it and took just a single photograph of myself just looking across the lake, and I specifically framed it so that either side of the image would be cutting it off like just at my best friend's house on the other side of the lake, and then the other side would be like my school, my high school or whatever it was. And in the caption, I put 90% of my life has taken place within the frames of this photograph. And for me, that photograph holds a whole slew of memories beyond just taking the photograph. And that was one that I was like super, super stoked to take just because I live in this unique area where I can capture that, where I can be in like this really cool environment and see where I've spent 90% of my life, like across the lake with some mountains and the sunrise and everything. And I don't know, it's a moment that captures a whole slew of memories. And I think that was really cool.
That is a really cool idea for a photo. I think that's a cool way to like think about taking a photo. You know, like that's the kind of inspiration behind a photo that, you know, it may not make a shot that everyone loves, but that's one that you are going to love for the rest of your life. You know, and especially to like compare it with a caption like that or just a phrase, you know, putting something behind that photo is really cool. Let's take a step back real quick though.
Okay.
We talked about finding inspiration like more on a daily basis, kind of short term, but let's think big picture. Like what photographers inspire you to get out and shoot?
Yeah, for sure. So there's one photographer in specifically that I've been inspired by most recently. His name is Kyle McDougall, and he's a film photographer. I've been watching a lot of his stuff on YouTube lately, and he does a lot of medium format film and even some large format film photography. And a lot of his, at least some of his older work, like in the past 2 years or so, has been based in like the American Southwest. So like Arizona, Utah, Route 66, like just kind of that vibe. And he's taken a lot of pictures of like abandoned buildings or like abandoned cars or just old car shows, old gas stations, stuff like that. Just nostalgic locations, I guess you could call them. And I've been super inspired by that. And you can tell if you scroll through my Instagram, I've got lots of pictures of abandoned houses and abandoned cars and just kind of a similar vibe, you know, that he kind of puts off through his videos and his Instagram and everything. And I think that's something that, especially recently, has been inspiring me for a little while now.
Yeah. What about your dad? Because you said he had a camera when you were growing up. Like, does him and like, I guess whatever he did with the camera, his work, like, does that run through you today?
How so do you mean?
Like, does what he did early on in your life with the camera and seeing the kind of photos and stuff he took, like, does that influence the way you look for photos?
Definitely. Yeah, I think spending some time with him while he was doing his work, he was very strongly inspired by Ansel Adams. He would take a lot of black and white photographs and kind of edit them to look like Ansel Adams and things like that. And recently I've actually been shooting a lot of black and white myself, just because it actually kind of reminds me of spending time with my dad while he was out taking photographs. And yeah, I mean, it's another one of those things actually where it's kind of a way of reaching back into your own memories. And each photograph, even though, like for example, I just went out on a photo shoot this last Sunday with my wife, and we were up by Mirror Lake, and right now up there it's all snowy. And I took a whole bunch of photos on black and white film, and I'm excited to get those. I just took them to the lab today, so I'm excited to get those back. But just up there shooting those photos on black and white, I was reminiscing to myself about like the black and white photos I've seen my dad take and the time that I spent with him when he was out taking photos. And I'm like excited to get those black and white photos back and just show them to my dad and just be like, look at this, like this is totally like your style. This is inspired by you, you know? And so I think my dad has definitely inspired me, and actually that's probably even more recent than Kyle McDougall, because that's like what I've been focusing on for the past few shoots that I've done.
That's super cool. I think it's a really cool connection to have through photography with your dad. I mean, that because it helps build that relationship, makes everything you do in this space, even if it's not just black and white stuff, but like all of it, it adds so much more meaning behind every photo you get to take, especially if he loves all this stuff still too. Is there any differences shooting purely black and white compared to like just a normal color image that we might take with our cameras?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think black and white is definitely a mood. There's definitely a time and a place to shoot black and white. Yeah, I don't know. It's like in most scenarios, I would prefer to have color in my photos. I think color is a huge portion of what makes a photo good. And I think that's part of the reason why I love to shoot black and white, is because it kind of takes away that part of the photograph. And it's a good exercise to figure out how you can make a photograph still amazing without using colors. So it's kind of like I was talking about actually with the soap and the sink, like just breaking it down to the basics and trying to figure out how you can make something good out of something that's more basic than what you would normally be using, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you mentioned you were shooting on black and white film. Do you shoot primarily film, or do you just add that on to digital stuff?
Yeah, so I've mostly shot digital, like ever since I started doing photography. I've shot film here and there during most of the time that I've been doing photography, but I've especially recently been focusing on film more, and I think that's actually partially because of Kyle McDougall and partially because of my dad. Those are both big influences for me that have kind of pushed me towards film. So I've definitely been focusing more on film lately than on digital, but most of my work is digital.
Do you enjoy film more?
I think right now I do. I don't think I will always enjoy film more. I think it's another one of those things where it's like there's a time and place for film and there's a time and place for digital. And I think, it really just depends on what it is that you're shooting. But right now, I think I enjoy film more than I enjoy digital. And I enjoy shooting things that are better on film than shooting things that are good on digital. So yeah, right now I enjoy film more, but I think it's a phase. My wife can tell you I have many phases.
Yeah. Does your wife shoot too?
She does. She does a completely different type of photography from me, though. She does more portraits, and she does infant photography, which is really cool, and she loves it. She's a baby fanatic, so.
Yeah. What's it like to get to share that same passion with your wife?
Oh, it's super cool, and she's an adventurer too, and so we'll go out to the mountains, and she doesn't like taking pictures of the grand vistas or anything like that. She's more detail oriented, and so she'll find like the flowers or the tiny little tree that has snow on it and stuff like that. So it's really interesting actually to take her out with me on these photo shoots, and she's completely opposite of me, focusing on these tiny details, and I'm focusing on these grand vistas and whatnot. And then we've actually been talking here and there about trying to make like a photo book where it's like one of my photos and it's a vista, and then we've got like a detail shot in the same place from her, and just like put that together. I think that'd be super cool to do with my wife sometime.